"Please do not kick me. I am already tired," she whispered under her breath. The words were almost swallowed by the clatter of plates and the hiss of the grill. Steam fogged the window of the diner, the smell of burnt coffee and frying oil mixed with a faint perfume of lemon from the cleaner. And her apron, once white, carried a thin brown arc of stains. At 29, Mia had learned to make herself small between shifts, to fold shame into orders and smiles. Across the counter, a man in a plain jacket had watched a customer shove a cup into her hand and snap, "You should know better by now." He set his coffee down carefully, his fingers leaving a dark crescent ring, and something in his chest shifted in a way he had not felt in years. If this moment touched you, please give the video a thumbs up. The room smelled like old vinyl and sugar. The neon sign outside hummed like an annoyed insect. And the jukebox played a slow song someone had chosen for its melancholy. The customer, a tall man with a voice like gravel, had leaned over the counter and said something sharp. Plates paused. Forks hovered halfway to mouths. Maria from the kitchen tightened her grip on the cloth. Tony, the busboy, stopped stacking glasses. A little boy named Eli stared with a milk mustache and could not look away. The insult landed not as a single line, but as a ripple that made the room colder. Mia kept her eyes down, the muscles around her mouth working like a held secret. Silence held for a moment like glass. The taller man continued, louder this time, as if volume could make guilt vanish. "You people are always late. This is why service is bad." The hostess Priya looked at him, then at the owner Marcus, and Marcus rubbed his temple as if the weight of the complaint settled briefly on his shoulder and then rolled off. Outside, a bus hissed. Tires on wet asphalt. The man at the counter, who would later be known by few as Daniel, set his cup down and left a small envelope without fanfare. His shoes squeaked on the linoleum on the way out. The envelope sat near the sugar caddy like a quiet promise that something unseen had changed. The man in the jacket did not belong to the daily cast of the diner. He was an observer whose eyes tracked details. The scar at the edge of Mia's knuckle, the wobble in Eli's step as he hopped off his stool, the way Linda, the regular, covered her face with a napkin. He could have ignored it. He could have finished his coffee, left a tip, and been done. Instead, he spoke. "Excuse me, sir," he said, voice even. "Then, I think you should apologize." The tall customer scoffed and barked back. "Who are you to tell me anything?" The man in the jacket smiled very faintly and said, "I saw that waitress hold back tears to keep your sandwich warm." That line landed differently. Words triggered a small storm. Marcus rose slowly from behind the register and said, "Let's keep respect here." The tall man muttered and left, pushing past the swinging door with a clatter. Two servers, Jamal and Sarah, exchanged looks. Mrs. Alvarez, an elderly regular, pressed her palm to her chest as if to still a sudden hurt. The air had shifted. The man in the jacket closed his hand around the small envelope like a soldier catching a fallen flag. When he stepped away from the counter, Daniel did not reveal his name or his work. He carried the kind of quiet that hid a profession and a purpose. In panel-like motions, he took his phone out and tapped a contact, his voice low. "Hi, this is Daniel," he said. "I'm at Tony's Diner on Maple. I just watched something I could not ignore." Later he would explain, "I do not do applause, I do things." He left behind more than words. He left a question in the heads of every person in that room. Who chooses to stand up? Why now? Marcus, cleaning his hands on a towel that smelled like lemon and bleach, watched the doorway like it had become a hinge between smallness and a possibility of being seen. The first turn had been made. If you are feeling a lump in your throat right now, you are not alone. Many people who watch this story will remember a time they felt powerless or saw someone else made small. Tell us in the comments below. Start your reply with "I saw" or "I did" and share what stopped you or what helped you act. Sharing your memory can help others find courage or an idea for the next time they see unfairness. We read every comment, and sometimes those stories become the spark for other episodes. Your voice matters here because this channel tries to turn witness into action and shame into community learning. Now return with me to that night and to the conversation that changed everything. Daniel walked back in 10 minutes later with a note in his hand and an unhurried pace. He asked to speak to Mia when the lunch rush thinned. She almost said no, because no meant invisible and safe in an empty booth where hurting could be folded like a napkin. He motioned gently and sat at the corner table with his coffee cooling. They exchanged a look that held the room's echo. "I'm Daniel," he said softly, "and I work in the neighborhood. I just wanted to say I'm sorry that happened to you." Mia blinked, her voice small. "Thank you," she said. "I remember you from last month, the one who asked for the blueberry pie without sugar," he said with a little laugh, and Mia let a smile form like a cracked window. Their conversation moved from apologies to recognition, and then to an offer. Daniel cleared his throat and said, "I run a small investment group, not flashy. We help places that matter. Would you like to talk about a change here that would give you steadier hours and dignity?" The exchange grew. Mia asked, "Why me? Why this diner?" He answered, "Because I saw you, and because a community deserves work that pays." The dialogue unspooled into a series of exchanges where each sentence carried an undercurrent of fear and hope. Mia asked about conditions, about pay, about whether she would just be moved like a piece on a board. Daniel answered with specifics and a promise of involvement, and when Marcus overheard part of it, he tapped his fingers on the counter, like someone counting the cost of courage. There were 5 explicit back-and-forth lines in that table conversation, and each line included a small action: a hand smoothed across a napkin, a breath held, a head tilted listening with the weight of a life on it. Mia's backstory unfurled slowly, and then in one longer breath. She had grown up 2 towns over, the daughter of a seamstress named Rosa, who taught her to mend not just hems, but pride. At 18, she had left for the city with a duffel bag and a promise she could be more than the payroll numbers they told her she was. She had worked as a cashier, a shelf stocker, and for a year at a call center that taught her how to make her sadness sound helpful. 2 years ago, her partner left after a fight about money and silence, and she became the only steady presence for Eli, her son, who loved drawing maps more than anything else. Her rent climbed, her hours were cut, and she found herself choosing between a prescription and a new pair of shoes for her child. The diner had been a refuge and a place where morning laughter and evening exhaustion mingled. She had once saved enough to enroll in a short course in bookkeeping and had been too embarrassed to finish when the fee came due. Those choices had layered on her until she carried a habit of apologizing for existing. This paragraph remembered her childhood hands' scent of starch and the sound of needles through fabric, and counted the names that mattered: Rosa, Eli, Marcus, Linda, and the teachers who had said, "Keep trying." Daniel's proposal was careful and concrete. He suggested a pilot program to pay stable wages for a core team, to invest in a small payroll so no one working full-time would be below a living wage, to add 2 paid training sessions a week where skills like scheduling and inventory would be taught. He said he would not take control of the diner. He would partner with Marcus and set up an advisory circle that included Maria, Jamal, Priya, Linda, and a local organizer named Officer Reed, who ran a job skills initiative at the community center. They talked about numbers and schedules and about creating a small hardship fund so employees could borrow against predictable pay rather than depending on short-term loans.
The dialogue in this meeting was lined with practical questions and warm reassurances. 4 to 6 exchanges that felt like bargaining for dignity. Mia asked about hours. Daniel said, "We will give you a consistent schedule." Marcus asked about ownership of profits. Daniel said, "We will write terms that protect your job and give you a voice at the table." Priya asked if the menu would change. Daniel said, "Only to make sure people are paid fairly for the work they do." Each answer came with a small sensory detail: the clink of utensils during the talk, the warmth of the steam that puffed against the window, the faint citrus from the cleaning rag. The first week of the pilot was rough and hopeful. The scent of fresh paint appeared behind the counter where Marcus had hung a small corkboard for schedules. Sarah, the older server, started showing up with a thermos of soup and a soft laugh. She said she had slept better knowing the check would not be late. Jamal took home an extra shift and could finally call his mother and tell her he would be able to send money for the repair on her roof. Mrs. Alvarez baked a batch of small lemon cakes as a thank you and left them under a cloth for everyone. The diner's register began to show steadier nights, and the first payroll under the new plan paid 3 cents more than what had been the standard at other local shops. Customers noticed small things. The light stayed on longer, the music had a softer mix, and the coffee tasted less burnt as staff slowed when they could breathe a little. Tension did not disappear, it shifted. A supplier missed a delivery, and the new fund covered an emergency. And when a city inspector came by, Linda explained the new training program with a pride that made her voice tremble. Marcus and Daniel met late one evening, wiping down counters, and talked about the risk and the strange relief of trying to do right. The scene carried the smell of oil and the sound of the street outside, the taste of a late-night donut shared between two people who had become partners in a slow kind of hope. Months later, the transformation was visible and ambiguous in the best ways. The kitchen had fresh pans that made a higher, more pleasant sizzle. A tiny bulletin board overflowed with flyers for ESL classes and a community health clinic that Sarah had helped organize. Priya had started a Saturday shift for teens who wanted to learn to work with customers and earned a small stipend that helped pay for their bus fare.
Reed came by and set up a table for resume help once a month. Jamie, a former dishwasher who had been nameless in neighborhood conversations, now had a framed certificate on the wall for completing a short course in food safety. Maria no longer worked 2 closing shifts every night and had been able to pick up her grandchild from school twice a week. The diner now employed 9 people on stable contracts, and the payroll sheet showed an average wage increase. The place had a corner mural painted by Eli that featured hands reaching out to one another. The effect bled into the block. Anna, the grocer down the street, offered a discount for staff on Sundays. Marco, the city council aide, came with a list of small grants they might qualify for. Conversations happened at the counter about savings accounts and future plans instead of only about immediate rent. People named each other, and the act of naming changed the ledger of what was possible. 1 month later, the pilot was in its 3rd paycheck cycle. Mia kept her same apron, but wore it with a steadier posture. She said she slept more soundly and that Eli had stopped flinching when the door creaked. Marcus had set up a suggestion box, and 3 of the ideas were already in motion: a weekend pastry special, a rotating staff playlist, and a weekly kid-friendly hour where parents could bring children and staff could teach simple cooking skills. Daniel visited and did not linger in the spotlight. He sat with staff and listened more than he spoke. Local reporter Linda from the neighborhood newsletter published a short piece, and the diner's phone rang with a few more quiet customers who had heard the story. The community had gathered around small rituals that mattered a lot. Donations in the hardship fund were modest but steady and represented neighbors choosing to be part of the safety net. 6 months later, the changes had held and grown in unanticipated directions. The diner was not the same small place exactly. It had become a hub that offered steady pay to 9 people, a mentorship rotation for teenagers, and a small evening class 3 nights a week on basic finance taught by Marcus and a volunteer named Priya. The hardship fund had helped 5 employees manage emergencies without predatory lenders. Mia had finished the bookkeeping course she had once abandoned and was now overseeing a simple ledger. Eli's drawings were on a local gallery wall for a youth art show, and he had started saving part of his allowance. The community had woven itself into the project, with neighbors like Anna and Marco and Officer Reed bringing resources and hearts. Daniel's investment group published a short memo about what they learned, emphasizing partnership, not ownership, and included names of the local people who had shaped the work: Maria, Jamal, Sarah, Priya, and Marcus. There were measurable outcomes: increased average wages, stable schedules, and 2 new hires from the neighborhood who had previously been unemployed. The diner's returns were modest, but the social returns were large and counted in dignity. In the end, Mia said something simple. She said, "I did not think anyone would see me, and now I feel seen." The phrase landed like a small bell throughout the community, and the story continued to ripple beyond the street. If this story moved you, please subscribe for more stories of ordinary people and hopeful interventions, and share this video so that other acts of dignity might find momentum. If you want to support similar work, check the description below for ways to help local programs that focus on fair wages and training. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful change starts with one person willing to say, "I will stand up."